am a people person. They did not seem like good people to me.
It's first the house burning down, and then the barn or the trailer burning down.
And now we've got the ex-husband and everybody living all on the same property. And there's not a whole lot of sisterly love there.
Everything's about me. Life's about me. If it doesn't benefit me, she's a narcissist.
I've never done anything like that before. And I could never bring myself to do that.
Based upon just the viciousness of this crime, I think you just have to be pure evil.
I was one of the first investigators called out to the scene. It's really dark, not too sure exactly what's going on. I see a vehicle, it has the trunk open. There's a body in front of the vehicle. Looks like it could have been hit by a fast-moving vehicle. As I get closer, I notice the front left tire is slightly low. There's a jack. Maybe they were changing the tire. I don't see any skid marks. I don't see any glass. I don't see what should be here for a hit and run. There's something else going on.
Seadrift is a small fishing town. It's always been a fishing community. Shrimpers, fishermen. People you'll find in Seadrift want a slower lifestyle. I'm Tanya French. I'm the former publisher of the Port Lavaca Wave, the local newspaper, and I was the reporter on the Janice Bunnell case. When the body was found on the roadside here in Seadrift, it was thought to be a local affair. But in order to really understand this story, we have to go back to Indiana and to the Hicks sisters.
My parents were David Edward Hicks and Catherine Louise Bradbury. My parents got married April 5th, 1952, and they settled in Indianapolis. 4 years approximately after they got married that they started having us children. There was a total of 5 of us kids. David was the oldest, then I came along, and then Denver was after that, and then Janice was born, and the youngest was Richard. My closest sibling would have been Janice. Janice and I shared bedrooms when we were growing up. We both had an interest in arts and crafts. We done a lot of crocheting and quilting.
They had a 6-year age difference, but they were very close, although they were very different in personalities. Betty is the more outgoing of the two. Janice is more reserved, where Betty drew the attraction of the boys. Janice was more of a homebody. The two sisters stopped spending a lot of time together when Betty got married in 1974 at the age of 16.
I got married and left home. That left Janice kind of abandoned. She didn't have her big sister around all the time. It left her feeling lonely. But I was married young, and that marriage didn't work out.
When that marriage ended, she moved back home for a short period of time. Betty and Janice were spending time together, just like they did when they were children. But then, shortly thereafter, she remarried. She moved to Denver, Colorado. and there she had a daughter.
I had my daughter, and she was the first grandbaby born. And of course, being a little girl was very special to my mom and dad. And Janice was very jealous of that, because even though Janice still lived at home, my daughter took her place as far as getting a lot of the attention.
Janice was still single and living at home. And by this time, she's about 26, and she meets a young local guy, Charlie Sanders. They immediately fall in love and get married.
She was very happy with him. He had a home, and that gave her the kind of life that she wanted.
Things are going well with Charlie and Janice, and on October 17th, 1994, Charlie and Janice are thrilled to welcome home their daughter, Catherine Louise.
My mom, I think all she ever really wanted out of life was to be married and have a baby. My mom always said that I was her birthday gift. Like, my mom's birthday is in January, and she found out she was pregnant in January.
But Janice and Charlie started having relationship problems. He lost his job, and he didn't want to take care of Katie. He basically just gave up and was letting her do everything.
My mom was working 2 jobs, and my dad was supposed to be at home taking care of me, but my mom was relying more on my grandmother to do that.
The tipping point in the relationship in 1998 was Janice is at work one day, and Charlie's home, and their house burns to the ground. The cause of the fire was never determined. The insurance company, however, did pay out. It was shortly after that Janice decides she's had enough.
She thought that she could definitely provide for Katie a lot better without Charlie around. And Janice ended up moving on.
Janice divorces Charlie. Betty is now on her second divorce. So Betty moves back home to Indiana, and once again, the sisters are close. In 2001, Janice is working at a big box store. She's been single about 3 years at this time, and she meets a co-worker, Brett Bunnell. Brett is working the loading dock. He's easygoing. Janice is immediately attracted.
Brett was one of these guys, when you was down and out, he was the first one there to help you. He was a good dude. He was wanting another family, because his mom and dad went through a divorce. I think he was looking for the fairy tale.
Brett grew up in a pretty strict household. Mother took care of the household and the finances, and Dad took care of the farm and the hogs. When I met Janice, it kind of reminded me of Brett's mother. She would talk, and Brett would listen.
I have really good memories early on from Brett. You know, we would play and laugh, and we would roughhouse and giggle, and he just was a really nice guy. I remember my mom came to me one day and she told me that Brett had asked her to marry him. And I remember telling her that, well, if you don't marry him, I will. He'd already kind of won me over at that time.
On September 1st, 2001, Janice and Brett get married.
I was already in love with Brett, and he was great, and he was a really great dad figure, and got to put on a dress, and it was a really pretty wedding.
It was shortly after that that Betty wants to be close to her sister again. Janice and Brett have this beautiful farmhouse, plenty of space. Betty, who is now on her third husband, named Mike Roney, she convinces Janice to let them move onto the property. They move a mobile home onto the property, and all of a sudden the sisters are back as close as they've ever been. They're knitting together, they're spending time together. And there's a strange chain of events that started to unfold after Betty and Mike moved onto the property. Charlie, Janice's ex-husband, has started to have a string of bad luck. And Janice wants him to move onto the property.
I think I was about 10 years old, and my biological dad came and moved in with us. He needed a place to live. We had extra room. As a kid, I kind of thought it was cool. It's kind of like the best of both worlds. And then things really just went downhill very fast.
In a strange turn of events, we've now got Betty and Mike Roney living on the property with Brett and Janice. And Janice goes to Brett and says she wants her ex-husband Charlie to move to the property. Brett wasn't happy about this, but he did what he could to appease Janice, and so they allowed Charlie to come live with them. Everybody thought this was strange, as most people would.
I don't think it was appropriate for Janice to ask Charlie to move in. Janice would say, well, he's just trying to get on his feet. He's just trying to be a part of Katie's life.
When Charlie moved in, Brett was not happy about it, but I don't think he was going to say anything to Janice about it.
I told him to go get a divorce lawyer and leave. I said, you lost it. You're brain dead. He said, well, it's my house. I said, well, you done lost everything.
During the time that my dad was living with us, I definitely think that the stress level was a lot higher for Brett and my mom. And I think that that probably put a good strain on their relationship.
After this has gone on for a few months, Brett's behavior begins to really change. He is spiraling. It's affecting his job performance.
We were all very concerned about Brett because he had obsessive compulsive disorder, and it became progressively worse. He would kind of be almost in another world mentally. He'd be out there a little bit. He was doing a lot of repetitive things over and over and over again.
He also noticed that Janice was starting to spend, or maybe pay a little too much attention to Charlie.
Janice would wait on him hand and foot. Brett was getting kind of upset. He suspected Janice and Charlie might have been having some kind of inappropriate relationship. You could come home anytime, day or night, and find Charlie sitting on the couch, and Janice wouldn't be far away from him.
It's at that point that Brett enlists the help of his father and a few family friends, and they forcibly remove Charlie from the premises. Charlie is furious about this, and Janice even more so. She's mad. She's angry. She's taking that out on Brett, and she runs to her sister, as she always has, and now Betty's involved in the relationship and throwing her 2 cents in.
Betty was a big presence in Brett's life. He married Janice, but he got 2 for the price of 1. Betty and Janice, they were like cohorts.
In 2004, The Hicks family experienced a sad time when their father dies of a heart attack.
When my dad died, he was pretty much what held us 5 kids together. And then my mom was upset and she just wasn't quite herself, trying to hold herself together. Then Mom passed away not even 5 weeks after that.
I remember, and it was probably around noon. We went to my grandma's house and she was still in bed. And I had gone back to wake her up and she wouldn't wake up.
She was done, huh?
Yeah. I still remember trying to wake her up.
The Hicks children have lost both of their parents in a short period of time, 2 months, and things begin to change when they discover that Janice's dad had named her mom as the beneficiary of his estate. And now, with Catherine's passing, it comes to light that Janice is not only the executor, she is the sole beneficiary of the estate.
There were 5 kids, and I think everybody thought that they were going to get this large sum of money. My uncle had some demons he was fighting his entire life. He was very upset about no longer being on power of attorney for my grandma's estate. And I remember that they had all come together to kind of clear out my grandma's house. And at some point in the night, my uncle had the idea that, well, let's go out to the shed and you can pick a tool or a weapon and we're just going to beat each other up, and last man standing gets everything.
As far as family, after Mom's death, the boys scattered. We never heard from them again. It is sad that we got broken up because of money and inheritance. I always thought our family was stronger than that. At the funeral, there was a big blow up afterwards. My brother got mouthy with Janice and said that she better watch her back because it was her fault she was dead.
Then when Catherine died, before an autopsy can be performed, Janice makes arrangements and has the body cremated. To the family, that was very suspicious.
There's no reason why she should have died. There was nothing wrong with her at the time.
Not too long after Janice's parents passed, Brett's mother passed away of breast cancer. It was pretty devastating to him because he was very close to his mother.
Shortly after Brett loses his mother to breast cancer, he comes into an inheritance of about $90,000. When Janice gets wind of this, she and Betty decide to start an embroidery business and convince Brett to finance this.
Well, I don't think Brett was really thrilled about opening up an embroidery business, but I think he was trying to make Janice happy.
Brett had spent nearly $30,000 on a trailer and another $20,000 on an embroidery machine. So when the sisters came to him for more money, Brett is becoming more and more frustrated. Every time he turned around, they were going to Brett for money. And every time he turns around, it's Betty there. He doesn't just have a marriage with Janice. He has Betty's influence in everything that they do.
Janice and I, we always hung out and done things together. And she said she needed my help. And I was more than willing to help.
In the fall of 2007, Brett is becoming more and more frustrated. He feels trapped between the two sisters. He's also no longer financially secure. I think he feels that Betty is turning Janice against him. At this point, things have become even more and more tense in the family, and things are just coming to a head.
I remember that day because Janice had gotten me up and said, let's take the animals. We had cats. We need to take them in and get their shots. Katie was in school and Brett and Mike were at work, and we headed out. We weren't far from the house, and then Brett called me and said that this is on fire. I just couldn't believe my eyes.
Brett was pretty tore up that, his house that his grandmother lived in had burnt, and I think it hit him pretty hard.
Shortly after that, the trailer that they had the embroidery machine in, that was torched. It's first the house burning down, which was like, okay, so maybe it was arson. But then you have the trailer burning down. Well, then again, that all of a sudden people's eyes started opening up. Oh my gosh, this is really bad. At this time, we were all really, really worried about what's going on with Brett. Brett was just at his wit's end.
My mom and my stepdad were fighting a lot more. My aunt was in the middle of it. Things were not looking very good during that time.
It's also about this time that Betty and her husband, Mike Roney, split up.
I was having legal issues with being busted for marijuana, so I was getting ready to leave the state and go to Texas. Texas was supposed to be a state where they could not extradite you.
Betty's looking for a place to escape and fly under the radar. She finds that place in Seadrift. She attempts to convince Janice to come with her.
And I think my mom kind of saw that as a way to get away from Brett. I think she wanted to leave because of Brett's behavior. He wasn't the same sweet Brett that he was when she married him. So my mom told him, you can stay here and just leave us alone.
Brett came to me and he said, Helmut, Janice is going to leave, and if I don't come, she's going to leave me anyways. If he stayed, he would lose his family. He would lose Katie. He would lose his wife, even though we knew that there were issues with his wife, but he did not want to lose his family.
At this point, the entire family moves to Seadrift. Betty, Janet, Catherine, they're all living in Seadrift. Betty and Janice find jobs at a local convenience store cooking. And Brett lands the perfect job. He is working for a local Parks and Recreation department. He's doing landscaping, which is something he loves. His job comes with benefits, a small life insurance policy, and it really looks like things are turning around for the Bunnell family. Once in Seadrift, Betty, who is newly single, she meets a new man, Michael, and before long, they're moving in together. And the sisters are as close as they've ever been. So once again, Janice and Betty decide to start an embroidery business.
We were working to get the embroidery shop opened up. Mike helped out a lot. Brett seemed excited about it too. After working hard to get everything set up for the shop early that morning, I remember getting the phone call that would change my life forever.
Generally, when you're working a case, it is very much like a puzzle.
All right, the nail case, right?
You start with pieces, and then other pieces will start to fall into place. The crime scene didn't appear consistent with a hit and run. The fact that there was no pooled blood, the fact that you had no blinker glass, no headlight glass, anything consistent with a vehicle coming by, no paint transference. The front and the rear quarter panel were covered in dust. The driver's side door was inconsistent with that. It had clearly been wiped clean with some kind of rag.
There was a wallet that was laying next to the victim. And in that wallet, the victim had their identification, and the victim was identified as Brett Bonnell.
The morning we were ready to open up shop, and Janice got a call from the police and asked, "Are you missing Brett Bonnell?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "I thought he went to work, or that's where he should be."
I went out to the residence of where Janice Bonnell was living in a travel trailer, and we sat down at a little table and began to talk. Everyone handles grief differently. When I did break the news to his wife that her husband was found deceased out in the county, there wasn't much of a reaction from her. Janice's sister, Betty, was standing up, and what I noticed is that Betty started chain smoking. Before she could finish one cigarette, she was already lighting another one.
I was nervous, fidgety, couldn't sit still, didn't know what was going to go on. And they told us Brett was dead. It was unbelievable. I was a nervous wreck.
While I was talking with Janice, one of the first things I noticed was the smell of bleach that was coming from the trailer. The smell of bleach was so strong. Some people are very clean people. Some people have houses like that. Well, I wanted to get inside that trailer to see what was going on out of curiosity. And when I did ask if I could use the restroom, Janice told me no, they use the community restroom that's out there.
6 days later, the medical examiner does an autopsy and ultimately determines that blunt force trauma to the head is the cause of death. He couldn't positively determine the manner of death, but he privately suggested that it was from a hit and run accident. A few days later, they put together a task force of both state and local law enforcement. They conclude with the coroner's assessment and ultimately rule Brett's death the result of a traffic accident.
I was so frustrated because I knew this was a staged crime scene.
The body was laying slightly downhill in the ditch with the head toward the bottom of the ditch, but the blood appeared to be running down his back, which defies physics. Blood doesn't run uphill. It told us that he was beat somewhere else and dumped there. And also, it appeared to have been struck multiple times because of the various areas of the head that had trauma. It couldn't have happened with one strike of a bumper. But the tire was flat. When we examined the tire closely, we saw that it had apparent puncture attempts in the sidewall of the tire, but it was unsuccessful.
How did you feel when you heard the news?
I love Brett. I care about Brett, and he means a lot to me. I was in utter disbelief, and I want to know what happened because this is wrong. He was killed. He was murdered. But it just, I don't know. I'm an emotional person anyways. I just can't help it. But didn't know this person. We had
Do you want to take a quick break?
Yeah, let me take a quick break. Yeah, that'd be good.
Stand up and take a second.
Yep, thank you.
Cedar being such a small town, 1,300 people, everyone knows what everyone is doing. Lots of rumors are flying around. With all the rumors that are going on, drug-related, illegal immigration, cartel, different things, we knew we still had to get Betty to come in for an interview.
How did you come about coming down here?
Because I needed to get to warmer weather and get away from things and the bad atmosphere I was in up there. So I talked them into moving down here with me.
Okay. What kind of bad atmosphere were you in up there?
Just hanging around bad friends and everything with the drugs and stuff. And I was trying to get away from that. So.
Okay.
We found out when we started to dig in that Betty Romey had warrants for some drug possession and a violation of probation out of Indiana. So what we did was we spoke to the district attorney's office, who contacted Indiana, and they agreed to make those warrants extraditable to where we could arrest her, throw her in jail, and she would feel the walls closing in on her once she got put in jail, and that might be a turning point.
Betty's sitting in her jail cell, having been picked up on the charges in Indiana, waiting for somebody to get her out, and she calls Janice. She asks Janice to make bail for her.
When I called my sister to get her to bail me out, she said pretty much her hands were tied, that I made my bed, I needed to lay in it, which pissed me off to no end. After everything I had done for her, she wasn't going to help me out. I contacted the investigators.
Betty wants to meet. She wants to meet with anybody involved in the investigation because she has a story to share.
This is a picture of us when we were growing up in the trailer park next to our home, never believing what could happen to a family like ours. You can't tell it by these pictures.
Just 2 months after Brett Bonnell was killed, Betty wants to have a sit down to talk to anybody involved in this investigation, and that she has a story to share that none of them will believe.
Michael said you wanted to talk to us, and
I do want to talk to you.
Okay.
And just afraid of what's going to happen to me. I can tell you what happened and what I have involved in it.
Okay.
I didn't murder anybody.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that.
Okay.
I've been married 7 times. I'd never murder anybody.
Betty had thought this through, and she was determined to not go down for this. She was trying to work a deal to where she didn't get charged with the murder.
Janice and Brett were having a lot of problems. He had told her there was no way in hell that he was going to let her have a divorce, or she was going to get away from him. I got a call at midnight. She called and asked me to come down. I went down, and I walked in the trailer, and Brett was laying dead on the bed. She had beat him with a baseball bat.
When I walked into that house, it was like a horror movie. Blood splattered all over the place. I said, I'm going to call the police. She said, no, you got to help me move the body. Katie can't find this. She can't see any of this. If it hadn't have been for Katie, I wouldn't have done any of this.
Betty told us that she and Janice wrapped the body in a blanket, put it in the SUV, drove to the scene on Old Seabridge Highway where they staged it to look like a hit and run. And then they pulled Brett's wallet out of his pocket. They strung the contents around him to make it look like a possible robbery. They pulled his pockets out. They tried to make it look like Brett was changing a front tire that had gone flat. They attempted to puncture the tire with some sharp object, but they couldn't get it punctured, so they let the air out.
And then we went back to the trailer, and she gathered up everything that was the blankets and stuff, and the baseball bat, and just took everything out and burned it in our burn barrel like that.
When the RV was tested with luminol, it appeared that there was extensive blood spatter on the ceiling of the RV, on the floor of the RV, on the walls of the RV, and it was apparent that somebody had been struck multiple times with a blunt force trauma weapon of some type. We went to the burn barrel at the boyfriend's house, and we discovered in that burn barrel some burnt cloth, a burnt seatbelt partial, and a buckle from the seatbelt inside of that vehicle. And even though Betty said that she burned the baseball bat inside of that burn barrel, we didn't find a bat. If it burned totally to ashes. It's always hard to determine if somebody's telling you the complete truth regarding their involvement in a murder. Do I believe that Betty had nothing to do with the murder? No, I think she had more to do with it than she said, but tampering with evidence was what it took for the prosecutors to get her to spill the beans on her sister. Janice was arrested on a murder warrant for the murder of Brett Bunnell.
We're wanting you to help yourself
Help myself how?
by being straightforward with us and telling us, cooperating with
And it
us.
doesn't matter, I'm still going to go to prison for what I did.
When Janice was questioned, she said that apparently Brett was sleeping that night in his bed in the RV. Once Janice worked up the nerve to go ahead and kill him.
You struck him while he was sleeping?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if he'd been awake, I would have never. He was so much stronger than what I was.
So what time was it?
Probably around midnight.
Where did you hit him at first? Do you remember?
In the head.
Can you tell me what led up to this?
Just every night it was like a nightmare with him when he come home. I could do nothing right. I don't care if I had dinner ready, had his clothes laid out for him to take a shower, nothing was ever right. He was screaming and yelling constantly at us. He would pull back his fist to punch me.
When I spoke to people who knew Brett, I couldn't find any confirmation of Janice's accusations that he was violent with her. We never had any evidence that he was ever violent toward her or anyone else. She was hoping to strike some kind of a deal about being a battered wife and killing Brett in self-defense.
The sisters sit in the county jail for a month. Janice is being held on murder charges. Betty is being held on the marijuana charges. Janice finds out about this and she is furious that Betty hasn't been charged with murder as well. She contacts investigators and said she too has a story.
When Janice was interviewed, she tried to blame it on Betty. Janice claimed that Betty's idea was to kill Brett so they could split the insurance money between the two of them.
I understand that Brett had some life insurance, is that correct?
A policy through his work.
Do you know how much that was?
$18,209 is what the letter said.
According to what Janice told us, it was Betty's idea to commit the murder. It was Betty's idea to plan how the murder was going to be staged to make it look like a hit and run. Betty gave her the baseball bat to commit the murder. Betty called Janice on multiple occasions asking, why haven't you done it yet? Why haven't you done it yet? And then it was Betty's idea to do the cover-up.
When I heard that Janice was trying to pin the murder on me, it was unreal. I was devastated. When I was the one that was trying to help her out.
My mom and my aunt had had conversations about how to get rid of Brett. And they had a plan. I think I knew what they were going to do. I just never knew that they would actually go through with it. They definitely had it planned. The night that Brett died, my mom kind of nodded to me like to tell me that tonight was the night. And I woke up in the middle of the night and my mom was like spot cleaning to make sure that she had everything cleaned up. And I sat up on the side of my bed and I just started crying. It took me about 10 years before I would actually go and see my mom or write her a letter. And I finally wrote her a letter.
And to murder somebody that she was supposed to have loved.
I still love my stepdad. I still love my mom. She was a good mom, and she always made sure that I had what I needed. She always took care of me. She never left me. But some families aren't meant to be.